If you've traveled with me passed through the looking glass and down through the rabbit hole into a world which becomes curiouser and curiouser, in which everything is backwards. I appreciate your sticking with me these some 120 minutes of video so far. On this video, we're going to talk about the business of teaching and academics. I have trouble with the word teaching. I always have. It seems very presumptive. Presumptuous or presumptive. I'm not sure what the word is. You know, I'm teaching you, and therefore you must be learning. If you're not learning, then I'm not teaching, and am I a teacher if I'm not teaching? Once we get out of school, all the stuff we learn about this very complex and evolving world, we learn about without teachers. We don't need teachers anymore. I'm here giving you a lecture series for the last 2 hours, but the fact is that it's recorded, so you can go back and review items that you want. So I'm not disobeying my rules here quite, but the schools of the future are going to have academic consultants. They are specialists in their own academic field, whether it's language or math or science or whatever. And there are no teachers in these departments in the school, in the high school we're talking here right now. They're all consultants. And each of them have a list of students that they meet with on a monthly basis. Once a month, they meet with a single student and consult with them on their development, their academic development in their field. They'll kind of spot test them on to find what their level of skills and knowledge they've attained, and suggest items that they may have missed, area to fill in to get a good firm basis for, let us say, writing in English language. And they will fill a report out and add that to the student's record. I think I've mentioned previously the quarterly review board. When the student goes to quarterly review board to present his accomplishments for the last 3 months, part of those reports will be on his record, and they will be looking for reports that this student has made a real effort to have a good basis of vocabulary, that his math skills are up to the level of the kind of work he's doing and doesn't have any gaps in it. So that's what teachers do. We call them consultants, or I forget. We'll think up some name for them. I don't know. Advisors. In the school, in the pods, the permanent teacher is a coach. So at the same time, there won't be any classrooms. There won't be a math classroom and an English classroom, although there will be some labs that have special stuff in them that students can go to at their own choosing, their own scheduling. But most of those rooms, if you're converting over an existing school into an EdSelf school, will be pods. And so we have to get past the whole notion of instruction and fixed curriculum. I have a couple of slogans or truisms that I develop over the years, a number of them, two of which are, first is that the skill necessary to teach somebody something is inversely proportional to their eagerness to learn it. And number two is the permanence of what is learned is closely related to the real reasons the individual learned it in the first place. Did they learn it because they had to, or did they learn it because they felt a real need for it? If that's the case, what they learn will be a lot more valuable. The time spent will be a lot more valuable. When you consider the vast waste of time in academic studies that is lost by sitting listening to a teacher or studying textbooks that on information that is of little interest, that is not understood, that you already knew and had to be taught all over again, and that is eventually forgotten, as cast aside as being irrelevant to the student's life, unless he's playing what's that game? I forgot it. It'll come to me. Yeah, where you pick a card. And there's questions in there, academic cards, stuff you learned in school. It'll come to me. But other than that, when you think, what is the percentage of wasted time in schools? I don't know. I would guess certainly more than 50% is wasted. Probably 75%. Things you learned in school that you were taught in school, you were supposed to learn but never did, or learned and never used. That's a cost. That's enormous dollars cost. And not only is it a waste, but it creates a distaste. It makes the whole process a very therapeutic, medicinal process in which you have to take this as good for you. So anyway, let's get down to specifics on writing and English language particularly. There's a rule, hard and fast rule in Ed South schools, and that is that all language is what the standard English is spoken in the schools at all times by all students. And that if they veer away from that, they'll just simply not be understood. So you can imagine this. One thing is to get teachers to this level, so they speak standard English. I have made a great effort to be correct in all of my language because I love writing and I love the power of the English language. Maybe I'll slip up every once in a while, and sometimes there are rules that dangling participles, particularly, I dangle them all over the place. When I try to obey that rule, it sounds very strange. Who would ever say a thing like that? You know, Churchill had something nice to say about that. But by having students speak correct English at all times and motivating them so that they really want to do it and that they are quietly corrected as they go along, then they can write correct English. I bet you find a lot of schools, even teachers don't speak correct English, make a lot of grammatical errors and misuse phrases. So that's where you have to start. And then there are all kinds of interesting possibilities with language. Writing, recording the conversation of a student, recording it as he's talking without him being aware that he's being recorded, and then handing it to him and say, okay, now write this down as dictated here. Write it down exactly as you say it. Then he can look at it and say, wow, would I have ever written that? And then, of course, writing and reading out loud. there will be in the school. There's not very much verbal information given out as far as schedules. It's all posted. Everything's posted. Everything's written down. If anybody can get through an Ed Sales School and not be able to read very, 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 very well, it would be a miracle. They couldn't even survive. I spoke with one girl who told me once, she says, she's very proud. She got through school, high school, and she says, you know, Dave, I never had to read a single book. What's wrong with this picture, you know? Reading is, don't get me started on reading. The reading problem is that students are continually asked to read books about subjects they have no interest in. Now, if you ask me to read a book about hockey, of which I care nothing at all about hockey, if I had to read that whole book and take a test, it would be painful. And that happens all the time in schools, because a book is usually a classic. For instance, I went to classical education in my elite prep school back in the years ago, and I had to read Arrowhead and what were all the classics, the standards. And sometimes I wondered if we all had to read this same book because that's what the teacher taught. Because every year, the next class come in would be reading the same books, and he wouldn't have to read the book himself. He'd get it down pat. So the classics, the whole business of the classics is are there any modern classics? Classics are ones that seem to survive the longest, perhaps because they're chosen by teachers and taught in schools. I don't know. Our classics as deserved as they are. Classics are wasted on the young. They're wasted because they're forced fed to them, and they acquire a distaste for reading. Now, I've had all kinds of kids come through my house, and they go by and they see the books on the wall. And gee, Dave, where do you get all these books? Like, were you crazy or something? I said, no, I read them all. You read them all? Wow, you look almost smart. And I've had a lot of other kids in middle income families. They're not in poverty. I don't live in a poverty area in a ghetto or anything like that. But how many books do you find? I don't know. Studies, history. Let's talk about history. The study of history, I learned about the Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians, and particularly in architecture school. I guess it was interesting, but the one subject we never ever covered, well, to begin with, they were ancient white European subjects, cultures, but we certainly never studied the Far East and the Middle East or African culture back in those days. I don't know. Maybe they do now. I think they must, particularly if there's a larger African American population in the schools. But the one thing we never studied, and the one thing I think you will find very, very few schools today cover, the subject matter, is current events. I went back to my 40th or 50th reunion back at school, and I went to look and to see what are they doing. And they're doing exactly the same thing they've been done back in the late 40s. Everything's exactly the same. It's deja vu. But we had a get-together, and I made a point of asking that we could get together with a bunch of students. Just go in a room and, like all my classmates and stuff, alumni, to talk with the students about what they're doing there. And one of the questions I asked, and I was loaded for bear, but I don't think my classmates were, I didn't conspire with them at all. They asked their own questions. But one of the questions I asked is, do you read newspapers and news magazines? And they kind of look like, are you kidding? No, we don't have any magazines or newspapers at all. So there's no current events. They weren't in those schools. You can ask for yourself. You can ask schools you know about, you know of, and kids you know that are going to high school, and ask them, are you ever discuss current events? And I think you would find very rare instances where they do. That's strange. Now I'll go you one better. How about studying the future? Of course, you have to follow current events to begin to project and to say, okay, what might the future hold for Egypt or Syria or even China? That's the fascinating discussions you can get into. Because the strength of your intellect, if you're doing anything more than washing dishes, or if you have a position in life where what you decide is and what you do professionally is important to a lot of people, then you should be well informed about the future. Where are we going? The global warming thing is a subject I don't even like to think about. It's just, but I'm busy with school inventing the future of education. But isn't it curious? And why? Are there no magazines or current magazines or newspapers? Well, very simple, because there are no textbooks. There are, and in addition, the teachers probably don't know anything either. How can you teach the future? How can you even teach the current events? Well, in Edsville schools, we don't spend a lot of time with history, past history, because I think the study of history is wasted on the young. I think you've got to wait to get older. And then you can, if you're not traumatized by forced teaching of history, and boy, I have seen I've endured a lot of history courses that bore the heck out of me. Because they were just mechanical, and in 1872 there blah blah blah, and then it goes on and on. Drones on these. Of course, it's a hazard to overgeneralize, but there can be a lot of study of the history of the future. And I used to be a member of the World Future Society. I thought, well, maybe I can go there and join. I'm a member of them for about 10 years and went to a couple of conventions and stuff. And I consider myself as a futurist, a very amateur but very intense futurist. So it's going to be a very strange world out there. The schools of the future, as you can see, but very interesting. So math to me was just like, why do we need this stuff? But gosh, math must be fascinating. The power of math and what they do with it in science. I don't know anything about it, and I'm lax in not perhaps studying that more. But in the study of math, the first thing you have to do is to interest the students in why this stuff is interesting and why it's going to be useful for them. And that's true about everything in itself, because it's all students are proactive and teachers are reactive. So they're not steering the boat, and what they have to do is put buoys out there, and that when their students are steering the future of their course of their education, the teachers are sprinkling interesting things on the waters, little hints of stuff like, wow, what's that? To entice them and to stimulate their interest and their curiosity. And So it takes a lot of that. So math, I don't know that much about it, but I think, of course, with calculators, you don't need to perhaps do as many problems in longhand division. Algebra, I suppose it's very important, but I don't get it. that's my problem. I don't understand why algebra is important, but I'm sure it is. And but does everybody have to do it? Foreign languages. Is there any sense in learning a foreign language that you never ever use, never have occasion to speak because you never went there or never knew anybody else that spoke it? It's very important to weed out all the education processes that are done because it's there, because you have teachers that teach it, and that's why you got to study it, you know. I took 3 years of French. I got married, we went to Paris, and got in the cab, and I looked over at my wife, and I says, you're the, you took 5 years, I took 3 years. Tell them where we're going. She just went, when I went to Colombia, Cartagena, I think it was, I did manage to speak, so my Spanish did start to come back to me. But that's fine, but why did I need to conjugate all the verbs and do all this academic stuff? I hope it's not the same today, but my grandkids tell me no, and they do speak a lot of the language in the courses, almost entirely, and I think that's great. But they spend a lot of time in the studying the structure of the language and all this stuff, which is, there will be times when, if it just so happens that the student is going to be needing a lot of Mandarin Chinese, then fine. But you know, nowadays they advertise, what is that course that you take, I forget the names, they advertise, learn a language, speak a language in 1 week, all with recordings, and that's great. Why don't they use them in schools? If you really want to learn a language, the best time to learn it is when you're 4 or 5 years old. And this has been proven that kids can learn a foreign language. Preschoolers and early elementary school age children can learn a language in no time and be able to speak it quite fluently, with a kind of a total immersion program of learning a language. I think it'd be great if every student, every EdSelf student had to pick one foreign language, pick one, and that's what you're going to learn, and at least be fluent in one. I mean, you might want to speak Farsi or Russian, or who knows. And the fact that you can speak it might be a strong motivation for you to pursue working in that culture. And but let's not waste time with the drill and kill stuff that just creates more problems and traumatizes children, and who become adults who never ever touch the subject because I hate math. You know, what an awful thing to say. I hate math, and I've had kids say that, and I say, oh my God, it would have been better that they never ever took math than to come away with the notion that they hate it. So that's kind of the story on the academics and how we handle it. And remember my little slogan with the skill and effort needed to teach somebody something the amount of it is inversely proportional to the students' eagerness to learn it. So that's the first step. Students who really want to learn something will learn it in no time at all if they're really interested. And so I'll get to talk a little bit on the next video about, there's more videos coming. You're going to hang in there about the costs of education and how finance. And I got all kinds of crazy ideas about that. Okay, so far so good. And I appreciate once again, you're sticking with me. And if you've gone this far, you must be getting pretty interested. I can't imagine a teacher going through this. They'd be pretty discouraged about their profession, having traveled this far down this rabbit hole. So once again, thanks a lot.